Okay, going into part 4 of chapter 4, starting with the second language applications of interacting, noticing, processing, and practicing. So the interaction hypothesis on page 114, kind of self-explanatory as being needing a lot of conversation, which we know. In fact, usually I feel that just conversation practice is generally the best thing anyone can do when they're learning another language, is to have a conversation partner. So as as simple as that. But one thing that a conversation has is negotiation of meaning. So not that we're negotiating like a price, but negotiating meaning is like, I clarify something, like, I don't understand what you said, could you say that again? This is what I mean, let me rephrase that. And that becomes like, sort of an ideal language learning environment. And it's so much different than just, a real person and a real conversation, so much different than just listening like to a lecture or listening even to a movie where you're not actively, there's no pressure on you to respond or answer. And that's one reason why, even though a person can watch a lot of TV in English, they don't necessarily learn a lot of language. And a lot of internationals have seen so many, American films and TV shows. In addition to, we talked about comprehensible input before, well, now there's this concept of comprehensible output hypothesis, which was popularized in 1985 by Swain, but she was just saying that, we need output too. We need not just input. That's not going to be enough. We need output. We need to express ourselves. We need to talk. So I think that's a great term. And also, in terms of conversation, I mentioned before, like when we as teachers speak to our students, obviously we kind of speak ESL. So we learn how to choose simpler words, slow down speech, and that becomes like a skill that we have. A lot of students say that, oh, teacher, it's so easy to understand you, but I can't understand other people, like when I go shopping, and that's basically because we've learned to slow down our speech. And sometimes it's weird because we'll teach like beginners in the morning, intermediate in the afternoon, advanced at night, so we're always having to adapt ourselves, and you become pretty good at it. I think you have to be sensitive to other people, sensitive to human beings. You have to be human to do that and develop that sensitivity. It's just like some people are really good with kids, kind of relating to kids, learning to simplify their interaction. It's that similar type sensitivity, except if obviously you're not dealing with kids, but just language learners. A lot of body language, right? Some people say ESL teachers are like actors, like performers, tons of body language, gesture, song and dance type of stuff. Unfortunately, we do that a lot. And but other things like I mentioned, repeating things, clarifying things. Okay, going on to the noticing hypothesis is the idea that when a student has input, they kind of have to have an awareness, basically, of the word or the grammar. Otherwise, they're not going to learn it unless they really notice it or can analyze it, basically. And otherwise, like, that input will kind of go to waste. And it's an interesting that they mentioned, if we could hear a student, if a student could think out loud, then we know kind of how their brain is processing the information. But we can't. Like, normally we don't hear people's thoughts, but if you could hear a student say, oh, let's see, oh, this is how you spell that word, or, oh, I see, the subject comes, before the verb, and when there's an indirect object, like, then if students just spoke out loud all the time, we could get a lot of insights into kind of how they're learning. But we can't do that. As far as input processing, I just wanted to make mention that It's mentioned that we can't pay attention to meaning and form at the same time. It's like our brain has to choose one. Either we're trying to get the meaning of something, or we're stepping back and just analyzing the form of it. I've never really thought about that. It's possible. It's possible. I've always thought, we could do both at the same time. But yeah, it is possible that when you're totally focused on meaning, especially in a real conversation, that you can't really focus on the form that much. A lot of times when I tutor, like one-on-one, I take notes about the form so that I can just keep the meaning going and the conversation going, and then later step back and talk about like some of the mistakes that person's made. As far as the role of practice, on page 117, yeah, obviously everyone says, you have to practice something to be good at it. It's just that we want it to be as meaningful practice, you might say, not just rote practice, or at least not entirely. We think of drills as being kind of rote, meaningless type exercises, even though there's a place for those too, just like drills that we do for other skills like music and things like that. But mainly we want those meaningful practices, basically, to develop what we are calling communicative competence, which basically means the ability to actually use the language like in communication. We talked before about the declarative knowledge becoming procedural knowledge, and then here they take it one more step to automatic performance. Like that's the ultimate goal, is automatic performance. When you've kind of studied something, you've learned how to use it correctly, and then after that you don't even have to think about it. And I often think about like the golf swing. I don't know if I mentioned this before, but people tend to get a lot of lessons on their golf stroke, but obviously there's the term like don't overthink it, and that's when you're thinking too much about like how far back you're going or your follow through, and so you can't hit the ball correctly. And it's the same thing with language. At a point we can't really overthink it, and so we would call that fluency. Like fluency, are you being fluent in languages, is being automatic. And also they mentioned it even, in a way, if your language is automatic, then it kind of frees up your mind. If you do want to start analyzing things or talking about the language, it kind of frees your mind up to do that.